I want to get to my guests. I am joined by the one and only Ted Rall. Ted Rall is a political cartoonist, syndicated columnist, and good friend of the show. You can also find Ted from 10 to 12 on TMI, Too Much Information, with the one and only, the great Manila Chan. My man, how you doing, Ted? You doing okay?
I'm okay. How are you doing, Jamal?
I'm doing all right. I can't complain. I am I'm alive, I'm awake, and I'll go with that as being a positive. Um,
For sure.
Ted,
Beats the
you
alternative.
are right. I know, right? That's what when people ask me, they're like, "Wow, you seem to be handling X or Y well." It's like, what's the alternative? What do you do? I got to hit the story first. So Hakeem Jeffries, ostensibly the leader of the Democratic Party, right? I mean, he's at the very least Speaker of the House. Mama Bear stepped down. A lot of people believe that Mama Bear is still wielding a lot of power behind the scenes. I am
Mm.
one of those people that believe that, by the way. I don't believe that after 20 something years that Pelosi all of a sudden just gave up the reins completely. But whatever. Hakeem Jeffries, he's the standard bearer for the Democratic Party right now. He came out with this, I said this yesterday, he's getting a bit of heat for this. And I want to get your take on it before I say anything. And by the way, I'm using this as a conversation, less of an interview. I'm trying to see what I'm
What
doing.
leverage
Well,
do we have?
it's secondary to the point. This is Jeffries. Give me your take on this.
I'm trying to figure out what leverage we actually have. What leverage do we have? They control the House, the Senate, and the presidency. It's their government. What leverage do we have?
What leverage do we have? Now, I get you having this conversation behind the scenes, right? Like if you and the other Democrats are sitting in a room and you're trying to figure out, okay, what do we do? What do we do? How do we deal with this situation? This is a crisis. They've taken over everything. They're shutting down our companies, our organizations. What do we do? I get that conversation behind the scenes of, well, what leverage do we have in this process? Usually, though, you come out and you puff your chest, whether you have leverage or not. We're going to do this. We believe in this. And the Democratic Party is going to say, that's not where he is. He is effectively a broken man ahead of a broken party coming out saying the quiet part out loud of, what do you expect us to do? We don't have any power in this process. We can't do anything. They own it all. They've taken it all. What do we do? What do we do? Now, just to make a point, when Donald Trump won the first time around, that was not Pelosi's point of view, nor was it the Democratic Party's point of view. They were still in this mindset of, we are at war and we are going to fight every confirmation hearing. We're going to fight everything. That is not where they are today. This is a broken party. And they are exuding the energy of a broken party, represented by Hakeem Jeffries in that statement of, what do you want us to do? They own it all. I'm fascinated by that. Give me a take on that. You've watched politics forever, and you have this kind of encyclopedic memory of all of these eras and epochs in our political history in this country. So I am definitely into your take on this.
Well, Jamal, I mean, I do have a long memory, maybe more than most just ordinary voters, but I don't think you have to have a very long memory to remember like what the Republicans do when they're in the minority and they have to deal with a Democratic, trifecta. Barack Obama, 2008, when he came in, he had a supermajority in the United States Senate for a hot second, granted, but he did have it. He certainly enjoyed a majority in the Senate and in the House for the first, for his first term. And what did Mitch McConnell famously said?
Wait. Ted, give me 1 second. I'm sorry. I made a mistake. I'm going to let you pick up right where you left off. Please continue. I'm sorry.
Okay, so what did Mitch McConnell say famously in 2009 and 2010? He said, my number one job of the Republican Party is to make sure Barack Obama is a one-term president, make sure he fails on everything. He said it again after they failed to do that and Romney lost. In 2014, they said, okay, we're still not going to let him have anything he wants, right? He won't have his nominees, he won't have, and we will not let him get anything through Congress. And for the most part, they succeeded. The
Mm-hmm.
Republicans obstruct. And, I remember hearing, liberals and Democrats complain about it at the time. And I defended Republicans. I said, they are doing what a minority party is supposed to do.
Right.
The system is set up to allow this. minority. So it's like, even though if you have 50.1% of the vote, doesn't mean you get to run roughshod over the 49.9% who didn't vote for you. So this, or let's say it's 60-40, those 40% still have minority rights. And
Right.
so that's what Democrats ought to do when they find themselves in this exact position. And I mean, so people have a long enough memory to remember what Republicans did in terms of obstructionism to Biden, and before that to Obama. And, I guess I would have said Bill Clinton, except that he was basically a Republican. So it's, so the, it's ridiculous. I think Hakeem Jeffries is overestimating the ignorance and the memory, and underestimating the memory of the American people. This is absurd. There's lots of stuff that they can do. There's all the times the Republicans tried to shut down the government, or refuse to raise the debt ceiling, or refused to pass a federal budget to keep the government open. Democrats can do that when they're in the minority. No muss, no fuss. Democrats can also they can block nominations. Any single senator can put a hold on a nomination, and it won't go through. Any single senator, right? I mean, so like, I'll tell you what is not something Democrats have to do: vote 99-0 unanimously, the entire U.S. Senate for Marco Rubio for Secretary of State.
Right.
They don't have to do that. Maureen Dowd, who, whenever she comes up from the bottom of her glass of gin, has something clever to say. She said that, she's a couple days ago, she said, sorry, this wasn't actually her. This was on the media, Brooke Gladstone. She said the Democrats are hoarding their no votes like precious jewels.
They're hoarding their no votes. What? Hoarding their no votes.
So I mean, like, that's awesome. It's something Maureen Dowd might have said. But I want to give credit where it's due. Anyway, the point is, they're not, it's like, sorry, you can obstruct. And so, like, look, there's one thing, there's definitely the jujitsu approach to politics. Let them have their way. Then the American people will see what assholes they are, and then they'll turn on them. I mean, one thing you can count on about Donald Trump is that he will overreach. Fair. But then the problem with that is, I still get letters. My mom died 4 years ago. I still get her mail, right? And she was an avid Democrat, a big donor. So I'm always getting these, like, things from the DNC, send us money, right? And like, they always say, like, donate money so we can fight back, so we can fight Trump, so we can fight. And I'm like, okay, so you can't do the jujitsu soft pillow thing and say raise money by claiming you're fighting. Those two things don't go together. Either you're the soft pillow and you just let yourself get beaten up over and over until, like, your rival breaks his fingers on your face, or you come out fighting a party of fighters. You got to choose. You can't do both. And like, the Democratic Party has clearly chosen to do neither, right? They're kind of like, they're not like really like, say, announcing, elections have consequences. We want, the American people have chosen this. We're going to take our toys and go back to our own yard. They're not saying that. They're not also, and they're also saying like, well, there's nothing we can do. The American people know that's not true. We know you guys can, like, you can block in the Senate, you can filibuster, you can be a giant pain in the ass and gum up all things Trump if you want. And you can take your case directly to the American people and call for them to raise hell and lead them in protests and stuff in the streets and so on. They're not doing any of that. It's ridiculous.
So the question, the question is, why not?
Party. They're like a wuss party.
I consider that a broken party. I guess the reason why I said broken is because they didn't do that last time. Like, meaning them losing, their response wasn't, all right, elections have consequences. We're taking up all to go home. We're just going to wait until. They didn't do that. Their response was, they were just complete.
We're going to impeach him.
We're going to do everything in our power. Investigations. We're going to go after everybody that he puts up, either for the Supreme Court or for his typical nominations. They did any and everything in their power to go after him the first time around, even to the point of saying he didn't get elected on his own steam. It was the Russians that got him in office. Even that, like, meaning that wasn't even an attack in the, let's say, the legal space. That was an attack on this, even the very notion of legitimacy of Donald Trump winning that election.
Hmm.
That is not where they are. So
Yeah.
I guess my point is, obviously they have the capacity to do it, as you pointed out. They could have came out here, puffed up their chests. They could have been like, we're going to aggressively pursue whatever. And maybe therein lies the problem. What are they pursuing? It's one thing to be in opposition to just being opposition to Trump. Okay, but that failed. That was litigated over the course of the last election. That didn't work. So then they're stuck in the space, I think, of, okay, well, what are we if we're not just purely reflexive against Trump? Like, meaning, I guess the way I'm trying to explain this, and the way I frame it, they've set themselves over the course of the last, let's say, 4 years to be this party that is not a thing unto itself, but is purely and entirely reactive to whatever Donald Trump is. So they're relative. They're not, it's not like I would say, for example, I believe in healthcare, education. When people get old, they need to be taken care of by the state, considering they invested all of their energies into that state over the course of their lifetimes. These are value set. The value set doesn't change, whether it's Trump or whether it's somebody else. I'm sick of these wars. I want these wars to stop. That's value set. And so when I'm looking at events in the world, I'm making an assessment of, okay, do I like this or do I not like this based on the value set that just kind of is what it is. It is. I am what my mama made me, and that's it. That's not them. And maybe that's the problem. Like, it's not a situation where they're coming away from this saying, all right, we need to harden our beliefs in regards to what we are. We're still going to stand by this, but maybe we're doing, it's not that. I think because they've been so relative to Trump that they have no idea what they are when they've lost on a massive effing level in this way. And so Jeffries, who can't articulate what it means to be a Democrat, I would wager to you, not in real honest terms, comes out and says the quiet part out loud. We've been a beaten party. We have nothing. I have no idea what to do now at this moment.
What can we do?
What can we do?
I mean,
Everything.
what's funny is, right? I mean, Jamal, if I have a pretty good sense if for some strange circumstance, tomorrow morning I wake up and it's like, and President-elect Jamal Thomas is about to take office. I have a pretty good idea of some of the things that if my friends were like, oh, JT, like, what do you think he's going to do? I think I get 90% of it right. And I think if same thing, vice versa, you could probably say the same thing about me, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but we don't know what would happen if space aliens snap their three fingers and somehow, like, I don't know, President Harris suddenly materializes, right? Or whoever, President Klobuchar, President Booker. We don't know. Jeffries, we don't know. That goes to your point, right? Completely. I don't know if, let's say, Democrats woke up with a 64 vote majority in the Senate, control of the House and the Supreme Court. I don't know what their legislative priorities would be.
Exactly. I would say they don't either.
Yeah.
And I think therein lies the rub. And, for all of this talk about Jeffries, what I would have preferred in that moment is, I know I keep saying this because I think it's true, a contract with America. And I don't mean it in the, in the what is his name, Newt Gingrich way. I mean it in the context of a left agenda for America. And to be like, this is what we are. This is what we stand for. This is what we're going to fight for. And if Trump meets us on some level on this, great. If you don't, we'll fight him on it. That's not really what they're doing, though. And to your point, it sounds like we're going to wait for Trump to make a mistake. The American public chose him. They chose him overwhelmingly. Okay, fair enough. But we are going to wait for oversteps. Oh, that sucks. Because that means we're not changing anything in regards to going forward. We don't even know what to do to go forward. So what we're going to do is we are going to stay what we are, and we're going to wait for mistakes. That is the worst
They're
outcome.
not a loyal opposition. Here, I'm going to take a cue from the Taliban, of all people, right? So for 20 years, the Taliban were out of power, right? Technically, although they controlled the countryside in Afghanistan. But in every single province, there was, of course, an official government, governor, mayor for each city, and so on, minister of this, minister of that, judges, etc. But in every province in Afghanistan, the Taliban had the shadow equivalent of everyone with business cards and their own personal phone numbers. And like literally they were like the shadow government. So not only did you know if you lived in like Nangarhar province, like if the Taliban come to power, Abdul here is going to be the new judge.
Right.
I know him. And also, Abdul sometimes would be like, we're going to get, the central government in Kabul, they're worthless. The Karzai government, we're going to go talk to Abdul and maybe he can settle this for us. So they would literally they're behaving like, what, when you choose the Taliban, who and what you're getting granularly. That's just not true about the Democratic Party. Like, look at Harris. She campaigned primarily, and I don't know if she was told to do this. One interesting tick that I've taken from the new Trump administration is he's picked up on something that Biden used to do, which is he said, I'm not supposed to talk about that, or I probably shouldn't say that. And it's like, he's like, but the deep state's not a real thing. So it's just like, so that's maybe, obviously, DNC is like, maybe she was like behind the scenes furious and said she had all sorts of ideas. And I mean, I'm not even being sarcastic. It's
man.
I doubt it, but it's possible that they told her that. It doesn't matter, right? The point is that the party told her to do that. She agreed to do it. She did it. And she just basically didn't articulate anything other than, we're here to protect, save democracy. Here's the thing also. They ran and they said, basically, this is the rise of Adolf Hitler. It's 1933. Fascism is coming. He's a fascist. That's a quote from her. Yes, he's a fascist. So now fascism is here. It's 1933. If we're in Germany in this example, and we're like the Social Democratic or the party or the Communist Party of Germany, and we warned you that Hitler was coming to power. But I will say this for the SPD and the KPD in Germany in 1933. As long as the Reichstag lasted, they did not vote for Nazi stuff. They had they voted against it, and a bunch of their deputies went to, they went to Buchenwald first. They were among the first prisoners in a concentration camp in Germany. They resisted. Okay, this is not you. They just teed it up like this guy. Okay, this is Hitler. So should we give Hitler his Secretary of State? I mean, I don't think we should give Hitler his Secretary of State. But they did. Even Bernie Sanders did. Even Elizabeth Warren did.
They did.
I say Hitler doesn't get his Secretary of State.
At the very least, if
not
he's
with
Hitler,
not with
and maybe that's the problem, right? Like none of that stuff was serious. Like the idea that you're saying this man is Hitler, this man is a fascist, these people are Nazis, that is so extreme. And when they went there, I was like, oh, they must be losing. Like it's so hyperbolic to say that this guy is Hitler,
right? While
he is simultaneously saying we need to stop these wars,
right?
Like that's astonishing, right? So they knew that it wasn't real, and then you lose on that, and then the catch becomes okay. Well, what are you now? You've invested everything that you've had. You invested into this, and it came for naught. What are you now that it's done? I think that's what they're stuck with. Moving on to another story, though. Tulsi Gabbard is going to be approved.
Yep.
I applaud this. Give me your take on this. Tulsi Gabbard's picked for top intelligence official, clears the last Senate hurdle. This makes her effectively a shoo-in. Right here, the GOP-controlled Senate on Monday voted to advance the nomination of Tulsi Gabbard to be President Donald Trump's Director of National Intelligence, putting her on the path to be confirmed this week. The party line vote was 54-46, with all Republicans present voting in favor of Gabbard. Mm-hmm. What's wild about this to me, and as I was pointing out to the audience earlier today, it's the idea of presidential power. And presidential power in the age of Trump, where he seems to be exerting it, he's the gravity in this moment. And so Republicans, even those who had issues with Gabbard's nomination, because Gabbard, let's be clear, she went there, was like, we are knocking over governments abroad. We are using our assets to put jihadists in positions of authority. Like she said this on the record. I mean, even the chemical weapons thing of, look, they faked this chemical weapon strike in Syria. Tulsi Gabbard put all of that on the record. And you can imagine that many of those congressmen who was there as this was happening, knew this was happening, look at this as like, okay, this is She's saying too much. And even when they were doing the confirmation hearing, some of the issues in the hearing wasn't what she was saying being false. What she was saying was true. They knew it was true. It was the issue that she said it. And that even came up over and over among Democrats of, yeah, I get that. But did you really need to say it? It became that. She's getting confirmed. What does it mean for Donald Trump's power in Congress? Meaning, what does it show in regards to Donald Trump's power in Congress? That even Republicans that had issues with the Gabbard nomination voted ultimately for Gabbard and will vote for RFK Jr. to be confirmed. I'm astonished by it. To me, that shows such power that is being exerted by Trump's office. But give me your take on it.
Well, it's hard to know what kind of phone calls, recalcitrant Republican senators received. I suspect it's a combination of cajoling and bribes and threats, right? So probably there was there's the threat of being primaried. There's also, the cajoling. Like, do you really want to weaken your new president, just days into his second term, and have him look bad because he loses his nomination? Plus, it'll be, the Democrats who all voted for Marco Rubio, they're voting against her, mostly out of spite because she used to be one of them. Do you want to give them a win? And that's probably powerful in this highly partisan, atmosphere. But also, there's probably like, hey, do you really need maybe you need some more jobs in your district. Maybe you need a dam, or maybe we can do something for you. We can hook you up. What do you need for your vote, right? So I suspect it's that combination. The President Trump's never going to be more powerful than he is right now. He's like I've said, used this analogy before. Right now, he's driving the new car off the lot. It's losing value by the second. So he's got to drive it for all it's worth now, because, in a year, it ain't going to be worth shit. So, the political capital is going to be, people are saying 9 months. I'm like 5. Doesn't matter. You can ask FDR if you can do it, if you need more than 3 months, really. He got almost nothing done in his second term. So, and he's still one of the greats. Trump's power is he understands. Robert Caro wrote the Power Broker about Robert Moses, and the book isn't about Robert Moses. It's about how power is aggregated and applied, and by someone who's knowledgeable. Donald Trump understands power. He understands how to wield it. He understands its importance. He understands that in politics and in finance, it's everything. So that's been his entire life's work. So it's not surprising that he's good at it, and that he surrounded himself after, he had the dry run. The first administration, I'd say, was a bit of a failure, but he learned a lot from that, and he's determined not to repeat those mistakes this time. So the power is extraordinary. I also think it's worth noting that, again, the Democrats come off as spiteful bitches. I mean, the same people who voted for Marco Rubio are like, they're not going to vote for someone whose politics really align much more closely to their purported politics.
Yes.
But I had my problems with Tulsi. I mean, nitpicking's my job. And I used to pick a lot of nits with her particular, I kind of sussed out that the militarism aspect of her personality kind of bugged me. And that's why I never got fully behind her when she was a Democratic presidential candidate. But look, within the constraints of this dying system, Tulsi Gabbard's appointment as a DNI is remarkable. It's a win, and really progressives should view it as about as much of a win as we're going to get in a scenario like this. Also, RFK Jr. RFK's, he's also got it in the bag now. Also, that's remarkable. That's potentially game changing. So I think it's I think it's very clear, like, look, I know you don't like Tulsi because she won't slag Edward Snowden, but sorry, we need your vote on this. We gotta have it. So I think that's what it came down to.
And they got it. For whatever, like you said, arm pulling, cajoling, carrot and stick, whatever they offered, they got those votes. And so Trump is going to get the team that he wanted in order to carry out whatever agenda he's carrying out. Look, I get you with the Tulsi Gabbard thing, right? I guess for me, Tulsi was one of those few people who would go and meet with Bashar al-Assad, who would come back and was like, we're supporting dictators. That was mind-blowing to me. Because, you know, in this media space, oftentimes what you get is this kind of massaged, altered, warped point of view of this stuff. Like if we're doing it, it's okay. So the fact that we're trying to overthrow a government, we're investing billions of dollars to do it. By definition of us doing it, it is okay that we're effectively doing it. And it's one of those things that nobody ever says. Like none of these people in Congress ever point out, hey, maybe knocking over governments isn't necessarily to the best interest of America. They don't do that. It doesn't cross their minds. And so the fact that Gabbard is willing to go on air and say, we are investing billions of dollars to overthrow the Syrian government. We are trying to put jihadists in charge. This is not good. And Jake Tapper is like, but the US government says they're not doing that. Jake, I don't care what they're telling you. I went there. I saw it with my own eyes. It is what we're doing. That is an astonishing thing for somebody to say. And more interesting, it just so happened was true. And so, like, the fact that that person who's willing to point out the vagaries of U.S. foreign policy, especially in regards to us knocking over governments that we don't particularly like, created all sorts of chaos in those countries in the region, that is astonishing. And that is, from my point of view, whatever her defects and failures, that is a good thing. So I feel you on that. I didn't support, quasi. When it became clear that she was into these drone wars, she lost me big time. But from the standpoint of this notion of her and the willingness for her to kind of call a spade, oh, I love that. I love that.
No, it's great.
Yeah. And that is one of those rare qualities. It is a very rare day where somebody like that gets into a position like the director of national intelligence. I guess the catch becomes, what does it mean that she's in that position? And I'll ask you that. What does it mean that she's in that spot? Like, what is like obviously she's going to be in the president's ear. And obviously Donald Trump put her in that position to be in his ear on issues of national intelligence. I was talking to people about the JFK files, and I'll transition into the story because I'm also fascinated by this one. They found 24,000 new records in the JFK assassination that were hidden from the investigative body that was set up in order to investigate the JFK assassination. So this is 60 years later where they're like, oh, by the way, we found 2,400 additional records on the assassination. I think it was like more than 14,000 pages.
The Commission never saw them?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. I think I said the Church Committee, but yeah, the Warren Commission apparently never saw them. So right here, it said the FBI just discovered, show it to the audience just so everybody is on the same page. They don't think I'm making this up. Right. This is Axios. The FBI just discovered about 2,400 records tied to U.S. President John F. Kennedy's assassination that were never provided to a board tasked with reviewing and disclosing the documents. Axios has learned. The still secret records were contained in 14,000 pages of documents the FBI found in a review triggered by President Donald Trump's January 23rd executive order demanding the release of all JFK assassination records. That's astonishing. Those records, meaning the body that was supposed to give some analysis on why and how the president of the United States was murdered in broad daylight in front of everyone was not given those records. And so you come to this thing of like, okay, well, wait a minute. If they weren't given all of the records to make a discernment of how he was killed, then how do we know that the conclusion they came up with was correct? I mean, that has to be it, right? And all of the suspicions that were effectively there, I mean, a lot of people didn't believe, myself included, in this magic bullet theory that they tried to effectively put on the American public. And so you go for 60 years of not disclosing documents to the American public while simultaneously telling the American public, oh, we look, there's nothing to see here. Trust us. RFK Jr. fully believes that the CIA had something to do with his uncle and dad being murdered. Is his dad, his uncles? Yeah, his uncles being murdered.
Uncle, yeah.
So from his point of view, he's like, yeah, I want these records out. And so part of the deal of him coming on and signing on with Donald Trump was to release the records. Those records need to be exposed to the American public. That is one of the things that I want released, and Trump released them. And now they're finding all of the records were not given to the Warren Commission on the assassination. That is astonishing. I guess my question to you, Ted, is, for one, give me your take on that. But two, why does it take a Republican president to do this?
Well, it took Nixon to go to China, right? It's kind of like that. And man, I just wonder if all of RFK's family, who hates him now for not being a good Democrat and going to work for Trump, how are they going to feel if there's a different conclusion that comes out? Look, I'm not saying there will be. We may end up with, the Oswald as a acted alone single narrative. That's probably likelier than not. I mean, having worked done research when I was in college at the National Archives, one takeaway is, that scene in the at the end of Indiana Jones in the giant warehouse. That really is the way that record keeping is done in the United States government. When an administration comes to an end, the White House and every agency, every department, back then this was all paper files. They literally would just empty all the file cabinets, put all the files into bankers' boxes, tag them, and then send them off to the National Archives. And they'd sit in a big warehouse like that until someone asked to see them. 99.9999% of all these records will never be requested. No one needs to know about Serbo-Croatian language studies from 1962 or whatever. And so they're not asked for. And so now that said, there are certain topics that archivists, historians, investigators, movie makers ask for over and over and over again. Civil War buffs are constantly at the National Archives looking at old Civil War battle plans, and believe it or not, until pretty recently, some of those were still classified. And then in terms of the JFK assassination is obviously one of those subjects. So on the one hand, I can easily see how documents would be overlooked because, back then stuff was typically you'd have documents that were carbon papered. So, a memo or whatever would be typed up. There'd be multiple copies made for, 5 pieces of carbon paper, 6 copies. They go to different departments. And sometimes, things would go missing. Something that was at the FBI might have gone vanishing, but there's a carbon of it at Treasury, right? There's a carbon of it at the White House. So stuff, it's easy to see how stuff would go missing, and it's also easy to see how stuff would come back. What's shocking is that given the politics of the Kennedy assassination, and given just how, like you said, it's the assassination. It's one of the most important political events of American history. This is not something that would have, these 2,400 documents would not have surfaced. And there may not be anything of interest in here, but still, it's it's ridiculous that it took all this time. It's ridiculous that it took this unique set of circumstances, of who would have ever predicted if you told me Robert Kennedy's son is going to go work for a right-wing conservative president in the future. Yep. Really? I don't see that. And then they're going to get together and he's going to release the documents. What? So it's, it's absurd. It makes you wonder what else is being hidden. But by the way, I'm surprised you're not asking me about Mayor Adams. But anyway.
I am going to ask you about Adams, but one thing before we go to Adams, because that's another case I'm enamored by, because Adams was kissing some ass in order to get this kind of Justice Department to give him a pass on this, and he started the ass kissing early, by the way. But yes, one last thing, why does it take a Republican to do this? And I'm enamored by that question, believe it or not. It's a Democratic president that was killed. He was killed in broad daylight. Why does it take a Republican to come in and make this choice? And, as I was talking to the audience earlier this morning about it, when people voted for Obama, I remember I had this conversation with a guy, it was a white guy, and he says, I voted for Obama because he was black. And I said, what? What do you think? What does him being black have to do with your vote? And he says, I thought he was going to change things. Mm-hmm. Like that, by definition of him being different than the other American presidents, that he was going to be this rabble rouser and going in, almost like his physical characteristics of difference was going to be somehow articulated in a physical space, not just this esoteric looking, but actually doing. And he said he didn't get it. He didn't get what he wanted. He got a president who effectively was like every other president that was up there, effectively a manager of the intelligence state.
But
And so,
in fairness, though, Jamal, I mean, up
yep,
until Obama, every major national political figure who was black, Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, in his pre-MSNBC configuration, all of them, they really were all different. Shirley Chisholm.
yeah,
It's like I can't even think, Barbara Lee. I mean, they were all different by definition, because like they had to be in order to rise that high.
right,
Obama was the first, like, sort of, I mean, I wouldn't say post-racial, but he was the first major black political figure where being part of the system was more important to him than whatever racial identity. It just wasn't part of his. It was part of his brand to get elected, but it wasn't
right.
part of his brand to govern.
Well, as in the way that it was explained, you can be a president that just so happens to be black, but you can't be a black president.
Right.
Which, again, fair enough. It's not so much that I think the guy believed that Obama was going to do all this racial stuff. I think it was more so in the way that he thought he was going to govern, that he was going to be less, let's say, beholden to the same system as
Less
many of the other presidents.
militaristic.
Exactly. And that wasn't the way it worked. Trump comes in, he believes, and I think he's right, that the intelligence services tried to take him out of office. And in trying to take him out of office, he is far more skeptical of those systems, of those institutions. And it's clear as day that he is. I think it's that. And I guess my thing is, there's no political consequence associated with Donald Trump doing this. The American public wants those records out. They want those records released. They would applaud him for doing so. And they would have done the same thing for a Democratic president if that Democratic president released those files. So it can't be, the public doesn't want this. It's not that. It has to be something else that is going on behind the scenes that is preventing these records from being released, or at the very least is inhibiting presidents from doing so. Somebody is in their ear that's saying, hey, you don't want to do this. This is a bad idea. And by the way, Pompeo did the same thing to Trump the first time around, because that was something that Trump was supposed to do the first time around, to release the files. And Pompeo effectively told him, don't do it. You don't want to do this. This time around, all bets are off. You tried to take me out of office. You tried to put me in a cage. You tried to say that Putin got me elected. Fair enough. I don't trust you as an institution and an organization. So yeah, I'm releasing these files. I'm releasing these records. It is very strange to me that Trump is behaving in the way they thought Obama was going to behave, in an odd way, in this kind of weird way. Obama was straight and narrow. Donald Trump, far more belligerent. He's testing presidential powers against the courts and in a foreign policy sense with this kind of tariff war that he's effectively having against the world. It's very strange. To me, he is trying to reshape global order and domestic order. And he's using, while he's at the zenith of this power, of doing so. I was looking at polling on Trump because I was curious about how the American public was seeing the way Trump was behaving. My sense was that the public was okay with it, but I wanted to see if there was any actually data to back that up. There is data. Donald Trump is at the highest of his polling that he apparently has ever been right now. Now, as you mentioned, this is a falling rock, but the rock is at 53%. So 53%, based on the CBS News YouGov poll, found that 53% of U.S. adults or U.S. Americans approve of Donald Trump's overall job in the office so far. Most respondents say they described the 78-year-old Trump as effective, focused, tough, competent, and energetic. 37% viewed him as compassionate. Well, yeah, I'm shocked. They got 37%. Who the hell are these people, right? Who the hell is this 37%? Like, he's being very compassionate in this moment. Maybe the Gaza thing, if they don't know anything about Gaza, maybe they look at it as like, oh, he's being such a nice humanitarian, forcibly ejecting these people out of the Gaza Strip. Who knows? A large majority, 70%, say they believe Trump is doing what he promised to do. I think he is. I would give him credit for that. Yes.
Agreed.
The poll released Sunday was based on a survey of 2,175 respondents conducted last week, with a 2.5% margin of error. Give me your take on that poll.
I mean, if you're, I don't think with his diet or his age, he's capable of doing cartwheels, but if he were, he could be, or should be. He'd have reason to be. I mean, you and I both watched this man over the course of the last decade. He had a hard ceiling of 45%.
Yes.
That was it. I mean, he was never going to ever, ever. And then,
By the way, even just to interrupt real quick, even in Republican circles, if you remember, Trump wasn't bigfooting the Republican Party the first time he ran. He was getting like 30%, 33%. It was just enough to win because you had 20 other Republicans on stage.
yeah, exactly. When you're, the rest of the vote was divvied up by so many other, they split up. But like, yeah, if they'd been able to unite their opposition to Trump, that he would not have gotten the nomination, obviously. But yeah, when you had a hard high of ceiling of 45, you get to 53, and he wasn't at 45 much of the time. He was at like 38, 40.
Yeah.
So both he and Biden were always like around 40, or high 30s. So yeah, no, I mean, he's got to be. Look, I didn't vote for Trump. I'm objective. Look, if I'm a Republican, if I'm a MAGA person, I'm very pleased. I mean, it's like there's some, you could nitpick about like the order of priorities. There's some things that don't seem to have happened maybe, right now, if I go down the street to try to buy eggs, I have to know someone, like it's easier to buy weed. It's like, that's weird. But I mean, inflation seems like it'll probably be a real challenge for him, and that's one of the main reasons he got elected. Okay, but overall, you're like, okay, energetic, that's accurate. I mean, the guy's like he's gone full spectrum honey badger. The executive orders are flying fast and thick. He's it's all the stuff that we talk about. So yeah, you've got to be pleased. I mean, just think, when's the last time we had a Democrat hit the ground running like this? I mean,
exactly.
Never. FDR. LBJ, maybe FDR. I'll give you that. So, he's extremely impressive. I didn't vote for him. I don't agree with most of what he's doing. I agree with some of what he's doing. I think this isn't, about the JFK files. I don't think this is about him being a Republican. I think this is about him being different and being an outsider. He's basically always felt rejected by the elites here in New York City. Other rich people thought that he was like they called him the small-fingered vulgarian.
Right.
He's always felt that he was treated like shit and like an outsider. So ironically, you have this man with his name on buildings all over the world who's faked it until he made it and now really is a billionaire. And but he's never forgotten the way he was treated, and he's kind of like, oh, okay, now I'm the king, and I don't owe any of you assholes anything. That's all it boils down to.